Test, 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 test.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we need a roll call. But we don't have an acting secretary, so maybe we should
Up to you.
go ahead, Deb. Can you do a roll call for us?
Yes, I can. Okay. Mr. Hansby.
Here.
Mr. Hanselman.
Here.
Mr. Kaler. Mr. Stoddard. Mr. Tramontana.
Here.
Ms. Truscott.
Here.
Mr. Weaver.
Here.
Have a quorum.
All right, so for those of you who've not been to an organizational meeting, we technically do not have officers yet, so I'll be running the meeting until we do. The next order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So.
Support? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The agenda is now adopted. So we have a presentation. That presentation today is just board recognition. So you have several things that are at your station. First of all, the thank you cards by the elementary students were done by Mrs. Cermak's classroom. So we have those, and then you also have a blanket from the Panther Paws student high school store. So that's just a thank you, and then Cabinet also has a thank you card for you as well. So again, you don't get paid much, and you pretty much donated all your funds to the scholarship, and this is really, truly an act of service, and we thank you for all that you do. Next item on the agenda is our election of officers. So we need to get a motion for our officers. We will be electing president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer today. Do we have a motion?
I would like to move to see if we can combine all of these into one motion, if it's okay with my colleagues, just in the interest of time. And I would recommend, given that we've had discussion a few years back of keeping officer tracks the same for a few years, and this will be the second year of that slate, I would recommend or move that we nominate Craig Killer as president, Jason Hanselman as vice president, Brad Stoddard as secretary, and myself as treasurer, unless other people are interested in running, which is great too, but in the interest of time, I was hoping we could do maybe all of that in one motion.
So that is basically the current roles following through for this next year. Do we have any other motions other than that? Any discussion? In just a second. So we have a motion for all of those to continue this year. So that would be president as Craig, vice president as Jason, secretary as Brad Stoddard, and treasurer as John. Do we have support?
Support.
Okay, and I don't think we need to do all in favor because there were no other motions, so.
Unanimous acclamation?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And now that we have a vice president to take over, it's all yours.
Thank you. Turn to the organizational action items. The first is a recommendation that the Board of Education establish regular meetings in the organizational meeting on the following Mondays to begin at 6 o'clock at the Board of Education meeting room. February 14th, March 14th, April 11th, May 9th, June 13th, July 11th, August 8th, September 12th, October 10th, November 14th, and December 12th, with our organizational meeting January 9th of 2023. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Move to support. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have a calendar.
Should we do secretary to take care of that first? You got it somewhere?
Handwritten note.
Yeah, handwritten note, secretary.
To appoint an acting secretary for tonight's meeting.
There we
Oh,
go.
that's all right. Oh, yes, we was our secretary is here. Can we have a motion to appoint an acting secretary for the regular meeting tonight?
I move to nominate Brad Weaver as acting secretary tonight.
You got to step back further.
Support.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hey, congratulations.
Not yet.
It's the recommendation that the DeWitt School Board of Education establish work sessions on the following Mondays to begin at 6 p.m. at the Board of Education office, April 25th, June 27th, August 22nd, November 28th. We have a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? I'll just mention, Deb, you'll you'll send us invoice for all these? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's the recommendation that the superintendent of schools be the person designated to post meeting notices with the administrative assistant to the superintendent, authorize an alternate, and the secretary of the Board of Education also authorizes an alternate. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that for January through December 2022, the following be designated official depositories of school funds: PNC Bank, Fifth Third Bank, and the Michigan School District Liquid Asset Fund. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that the signatures of the superintendent, assistant superintendent for finance and operation, president, and treasurer of the board be authorized on the signature cards of the officially designated banks for the purpose of making deposits, withdrawals, wire transfers, and/or internal transfers of school funds held in the school district account. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that the assistant superintendent for finance and operations be designated the investment officer in accordance with policy 6144. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that the superintendent, assistant superintendent for finance and operations, and appropriate building administrators be authorized to sign checks, contracts, agreements, and purchase orders as subject to the DeWitt Public Schools policies. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, oh, I've already done that one, sorry. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the resolution delegate authority of directing the administration of district monies as presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation that the administrative assistant to the superintendent be appointed as the recording secretary for the Board of Education and also designated as the official recipient of DEA, DAA, and DESPA communications to the DeWitt Public Schools Board of Education. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. That concludes our organizational meeting. Sorry about that. Our first regular action item is the public communications for items found on the agenda. I'm just going to say, while Deb gets that ready, I'm going to say a quick word on, I'm sharing the meeting again tonight in the absence of Board President Craig Kaler. As many of you know, Craig's currently in the hospital, intubated on a ventilator, suffering from COVID-19. I realize many of you plan to speak tonight don't believe COVID's dangerous for your families. Maybe you don't believe vaccines, masks, and quarantines are necessary, but as you comment tonight, I just ask for you to have some grace and respect for our friend and
It's
colleague.
appropriate to say.
Colleague who's fighting for his
Wow.
life right now. And Craig's situation, it's too close to home for many of us, and even if you disagree with our mask and quarantine policies, I hope everyone recognizes we aren't requiring these things because we like seeing kids in masks. We're doing it because we're trying to protect not only the district's 3,200 students, 300 employees, but also vulnerable parents, grandparents, and other community residents. See, if wearing a mask can prevent just one person in our community to not end up on a ventilator, it's worth it to me. Who do we have up, Brad?
Start with Adam Holland.
I'd like to address a couple of topics tonight, namely the COVID protocols that are on the agenda. But before that, I think we need clarification on the new public participation rule. If you have it available, you can pull up the red line version of bylaw 167.3 that you guys had. That the public didn't see. At the last meeting, the superintendent, apparently speaking for the board, explained how she, in conjunction with the Michigan Association of School Boards and their national corporate partner, Neola, make policy for this district without meaningful input from the public or even the board itself. Now, I don't know how that process can satisfy the requirements of district bylaws, the revised school code, or the Open Meetings Act, when there's no deliberation, no discussion, no possibility for meaningful participation by interested members of the public. Not to mention the failure to make clear through the posted agenda or at the meeting itself that those undisclosed policies are even being voted on. All that aside, the natural consequence of such haphazard policymaking is the adoption of bad policy and confusion as to what those policies even mean once adopted. Discussion, deliberation, and public participation flesh out the purpose, intent, benefits, and harms, and needed clarification of proposed policies. When those fundamental aspects of policymaking are disregarded, everyone is left guessing, you all included, as much as you pretend otherwise. I was held out of order at the last meeting for purportedly violating the revised public participation rule, bylaw 167.3. Well, I'm sure you were quietly excited to adopt this provision, believing that it would limit my and others' ability to participate in meetings. It does quite the opposite. You see, the 3-minute limitation is as to each statement made by a participant. Further, the former single comment rule was revised from the broad limitation that no participant may speak more than once, period, to now specify that no participant may speak more than once on the same topic. That is a revision that you all made. So, your new rule provides for multiple 3-minute statements on multiple topics. As I discussed multiple topics at the last meeting, you were wrong yet again to hold me out of order. The question is, now that you are properly informed of what your policy says by way of the process you eschewed in its adoption, that is, meaningful public discussion, will you continue wrongful application knowingly and intentionally? I have another topic I'd like to discuss, and that is the COVID protocols, and I would request 3 minutes to do so.
You may have 3 minutes total. This is really easy. You get 3 minutes total.
This is easy. Please read the policy. Please read the policy.
You're going to have 3
and
minutes
change
total. That's
the
all
policy.
you get. We're not going to debate it. You're going to have 3 minutes total and you're done.
So
That's
you're
it.
telling me you're going to prohibit me from speaking for an additional 3 minutes on
Just
additional
like
topic
this whole
for
room
your
wants
new
to
policy?
speak. Everyone wants to speak. Let everyone have their
All right,
turn.
I will let
I'll
everyone
give
else
him my,
speak.
3 minutes.
he
3
can have
minutes
my
for
3
policy.
minutes.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah, he can
You're
have my
not
3
going to follow
minutes.
your own policy? Your own policy, that's what it clearly states.
He can have my 3 minutes.
If you can't stop speaking out of turn, we're going to ask you to leave.
Try it. McKell Church.
I just like to address masks on children. I know Jason.
Mikhail, can you hold up just 1 second? So
Oh,
you got the full,
thank you.
everybody's
Thank you.
undivided attention. Please. Sorry.
You're okay. Your comment was kind of a little degrading. I believe COVID's real. I think everybody in this room knows, has been impacted, knows somebody. But if you look at the chart of death by age, children have almost 100% chance of survival. As it goes up to 40 to 50 to 60 to 70, it gets more dangerous. Children are the topic right now. They have masks every day, and now we're worried about mandatory vaccinations for children who have almost 100% survival rate. They don't stop COVID. They don't stop you from spreading COVID. They don't stop you from getting COVID. Why would you mandate something that a child has such a high survival rate? I just don't agree with masks on children, and I'm sorry about your friend, and I pray that he's okay. I know it's a real thing, but also we need to move forward because COVID is not going anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Will Thompson.
Good evening. I brought some handouts that I gave to Deb, so I respectfully ask if you'd like to follow along. I have some information on there that will make my presentation much quicker and give you reference material. As the previous lady stated, I don't think any of us deny that it's very real, and my heart's broken for trash. It really is. So, just a few things for consideration, a couple ideas and things as we move forward. First of all, I think it's critical that we acknowledge where we're at with COVID, and we acknowledge that COVID is not going away. But I also think that we should be very happy that kids are at very low risk. So I have a few article clips here. Way back in February, Nature magazine did a survey of several scientists. 89% of them said that COVID was not going to go away. June 28th, Dr. Scott Gottlieb said daily COVID cases will never go to zero, yet we're still using cases as a metric. And on September 7th, WHO says COVID will mutate like the flu and is likely here to stay. And quoted in that is Dr. Anthony Fauci and the CEO of Moderna have warned the world will have to live with COVID forever. So I think we really need to get our arms around the fact that COVID is here to stay. Now with that, the good news is that the risk of COVID-19 to our children is very, very low. A study in Germany shows no deaths among healthy German kids ages 5 to 11. NPR article says children's risk of serious illness from COVID-19 is as low as it is for the flu, and many, many more. If we look at Michigan data from January 1st to December 10th, in the 5 to 14-year-olds, there were 5 COVID-related deaths in Michigan. COVID-related, not caused, out of 148, and amounted to 3.3% of the deaths in that age group. 3.9% in the 15 to 24-year-olds. So I think we need to acknowledge it is a very low risk. When you talk about quarantines, I've talked to them about it before. They're harmful to our kids. I hope we can all agree to that, and they're totally unnecessary. We should ask ourselves, why are we quarantining healthy people? I would agree if it were doing some kind of benefit, but it simply isn't. We know from studies, we know from our own experience here, when you ask any of the teachers, all these students who are quarantined for close contact, almost none of them ever come down with COVID, yet we're taking away their education from them. Now I know we've modified the rules, but the school quarantine guidance at the very bottom says unvaccinated kids can remain in school. We haven't done that. We've changed only to health vaccinated, so we're discriminating against the unvaccinated. There's an article from the NFL chief medical officer saying symptomatic players are driving the COVID-19 spread. No indication of asymptomatic spread, yet we're quarantining asymptomatic people. CDC even endorses the test to stay strategy. So we have all the tools we need. We can stop the quarantines. Several schools already have, some have test to stay. Others simply aren't quarantining kids. There is no benefit. If there were, it would be a different discussion. So I ask that please, let's stop quarantining for all kids unless they're symptomatic. Thank you.
Deirdre Thompson.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. COVID is definitely real. I lost my sister-in-law to COVID. But masking would not have made a difference because it was contracted within a situation of people being masked. I also know that vaccines are dangerous and harmful. I almost lost my father after having the COVID-19 vaccine. Within 3 days of getting the vaccine, he spiked a blood pressure of over 200. I was in the hospital with blood clots in his lungs. He was in there for 3 days and subsequently on a medication that cost $1,000 a month to mitigate the harm of the vaccine. So COVID is definitely very real, and it has affected my life immensely beyond wearing masks, quarantining, and all that sort of thing. But at the same regard, I don't think our children should be punished or suffer because of fear that we as adults are placing on them. We're putting the onus of protecting adults' health on our children by saying that they need to wear a mask. And it's wrong, it's harmful to our children. I think years from now, we're gonna see psychological studies that these masks have done damage to our children. We don't have anything right now saying that, but, you know, I mean, it's like when I went to the airport prior to 9/11, you know, I can tell my children, I didn't have to take my shoes off. I didn't have to do X, Y, and Z. I could just walk in, I could watch the planes fly away. Now my children, these young kids are gonna be like, well, there was a time where we didn't have to wear masks to school. Who knows where we're going with this? But I wanted to point out that Dr. Lena Wen on CNN actually said cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. There is no place for them in light of Omicron. Early in December, our own NDHHS got a study that did a comparison of schools with masks, with strict mask rules, partial mask rules, and few or no mask rules. And it was scattered at the first couple months of school, and by the time we got to November, they were all pretty much the same in terms of contracting COVID. And I think that may have been in the handout that Will showed you. But I have a color picture of it, but you can see by the time you got to November, December, it didn't matter whether or not they were wearing a mask. So, thank you again. Craig is in our hearts and daily prayers. We are close with the family, and it is breaking our hearts, and we love him dearly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Schultz.
I don't want to sound like a broken record because it's kind of the same topic, but I'm a bus driver. I've been driving for almost 20 years, and I don't know where the school is going with mandates, but I have grandchildren that I don't want them to get a vaccine. I don't want to get a vaccine. I want people to be able to make a choice. I like to choose lots of things in my life, and I think you guys do too. And it should be left up to people to make their choice. And, you know, if you want to, do it. If you don't want to and your belief is that it's harmful, then you shouldn't be forced to do something that you feel is wrong for you. And to have the whole school or the whole state, I hear the Board of Education is good for the state is thinking about mandating it. And I think it's an overstep of people's rights to do things by choice. And, you know, that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Amber Covington.
My name is Amber Covington, and I first want to say that, yes, I know COVID's real, and my heart goes out to anyone who's been affected by COVID. It's affected all of us. I know it's real. On that note, I want to talk about the illegal quarantines of school. Michigan law, their MCL codes 33.3.2451 that clearly states quarantines are to be issued by the local health department. That is it. It does not say school official, does not say anyone else, doesn't even say a police officer or a firefighter can issue a quarantine. That comes from the local health department. Our local health department is not issuing or mandating any quarantines. You call Liz Braddock, she'll say she has not quarantined anyone. Now the school, if the school cannot legally quarantine anyone. Now, I know there's the MCL code 38011A that you guys say that you have a duty to ensure safety and welfare of others, which is true. That gives you power to create procedures. If but it doesn't give you power to create quarantines. If the school official suspects an illness, that's covered under the Michigan Communicable Disease Act, disease rule, which states when a school official reasonably suspects that a student has a communicable disease, except for AIDS, HIV infection, and non-communicable diseases, the official may exclude the student for a period sufficient to obtain a determination by a physician or local health officer as the presence of a communicable disease. That's all the school has power for on that. And I know another question to ask yourself, is it legal for another MCL code to violate another MCL code? MCL 3811A does not give you the power to violate that quarantine law. Now, here's an example. I don't know if you guys read the news, there was a mom in Houston, Texas. She was a teacher. She has a 13-year-old son that tested positive for quarantine. She was following the recommendations and wanted to isolate her son. She wanted to get a second test done, so she put him in the trunk of her car to isolate him, took him to a testing site. They called the police because you are endangering the child. The right to ensure safety does not give you the right to violate laws. Just like the governor of Michigan, she thought because she was protecting the rights and safety of others, put in all these rules that the Michigan Supreme Court said she did not have the authority to do. So in making protocols, I agree. Keep the kids safe, do what you have to do, but follow the legal procedures that's already set before you. If the school suspects a child is sick, you do not make that medical determination on what they have. That should be to a doctor. The doctor may say, this person needs to stay out longer, or they can go back. That's up to the doctor, not a school official. All these decisions should be made by health experts, not you. And I know you guys think, if you guys think the Michigan Public Health Code for the 380 gives you power, mandate your staff to diet and exercise. You're mandating them to wear a mask, so why don't you mandate other health stuff to keep them safe as well? You're still worried about it, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Schutte.
I'm feeling a little better than the last time that I came up here to speak. Had a little bit of time to think. Mr. Is it Hanselman? I don't want
Yes.
to. Okay, Mr. Hanselman. Let me be quite clear. Craig and Linda are amazing people. Amazing. I do know them. I happen to be their mail lady. They have been so kind to me for the 6 years that I've known them, and I take offense. It just, when we're all upset, we all can agree to disagree on a lot of things. And I just think that that's not a good way to start off a meeting when we're already, all of us are emotional. All of us feel strongly. I respect that you feel strongly about vaccines and masking and all of that, but I feel like if I'm respecting you for that, you should respect me as well as not putting words in my mouth. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they don't think it's real. Like all of the comments, I haven't heard anybody say that. We all think that. But what we're arguing is for our children. Do you have children in school? That's what we're fighting for, is for our children. And if you had small children during this time, it might be easier for you to understand where the passion's coming from. You know what I mean? It's more than just spouting off at the mouth. I'm speaking from the heart, from a son that is self-harming still because of the masks and the quarantines, and a very good friend of mine, talking about, a child that finally got to see their face. It was so exciting. Are you kidding me right now? What are we doing to our kids? We have to agree that it's never going away. And this is not the norm. This is not, we just said the Pledge of Allegiance. And we said, in liberty and justice for all. Well, you know what? I don't feel that way. And this has been my home for a long time, and I'm really scared that I'm gonna have to just up and move if these mandates come down, because over my dead body is my son getting another injection when he already has sensory issues. He already has balance issues, things that I'm dealing with and trying to figure out before putting something else in his body that if the odds showed that getting a vaccine, a so-called vaccine, was safer for him than dying from COVID, I might consider it, but it's not. And I have 2 people in my family that have died that are vaccinated. So it goes both ways. So when you start off a meeting like that, it in my opinion, I don't know about anybody else's, but it makes you look kind of bad. Like, don't put words in our mouth, because that's not something that we've said. I did bring a copy of the Constitution, if anybody'd like to look at it. It's pretty cool, and you're gonna be seeing a lot of me because I'm considering a position in Moms for Liberty. I will, when I come to the meetings, I will be respectful, and I'm not gonna do low blows like that. And please, with everybody's emotions running high, conduct yourself in a manner that is a little bit better, please.
Chelsea Brown.
Here to talk about COVID protocols, and the theme of my comments tonight is civility and honesty. Fitting that Mr. Hanselman found it necessary to open these comments with a lecture politicizing a tragic COVID case. Similarly, the November 23rd meeting opened with a call to civility. I was then interrupted by the board and scolded, allegedly because it was uncivil to describe Dr. Stricker's numerous appalling communications. Apparently, in the eyes of the board president or the board itself, it's perfectly civil to plot behind the scenes to lie to parents, but to discuss that openly somehow is not. I see the call to civility for what it truly is, a sinister tool of silence designed to preserve your own conduct in a vacuum free of criticism while subtly painting anyone who refuses to submit as the real problem. Well, except the real problem here is honesty, or rather dishonesty. Every statement that I have ever heard Shannon Spierker give at one of these meetings or via her emails is completely embedded with lies, contradictions, and cynical wordcraft designed to deceive. She knows that everything she says about quarantines, visitor policies, her unilateral authority, etc. is untrue. Worse, she knows that we know it, and she says it anyways. This dishonesty is the true incivility that we show up here every month to speak about. As a brief example, at the November 23rd meeting, she said that policies that restrict parent access to schools are due to teacher comfort. So I filed a FOIA request asking for those policies and any communications related to them. And the entirety of what the district provided was a bunch of already public communications. No emails, no texts, no internal memos, nothing. Are we to believe that an issue of teacher comfort was never discussed internally? Then at the next meeting, she shifted blame to the principals. Of course, were any of this true, there ought to be some record of someone saying something somewhere, unless Dr. Strickert, of course, has begun to conduct her business in ways beyond the reach of FOIA. And while it is understandable that Shannon prefers to do her plotting in private, her preferences continually run afoul of the law. In that regard, I do want to thank those of you on this board for at the last meeting speaking up and beginning to push back. It's been long overdue, but we still appreciate it. To the rest of you, your cynical call to civility is proof that you see us, the taxpayers and parents of this district, as nothing but serfs, expected to crawl before you, begging for whatever humiliating scraps you might so benevolently bestow. Well, you're not our overlords, and it's not uncivil for us to say so. There has, of course, been rampant incivility afoot in the district this year, but it has been from you against us, not the other way around, as we saw on display tonight in your continued reprehensible treatment of Adam Holland. So here I am again, calling on grown adults with impressive resumes who should and do know better to set an example for the kids you claim to care about and do the right thing. Hold Shannon accountable as the law and your duty charge you to do. Object to this illegal insanity and put a stop to it. That's what we want. That's how you can represent us. Please do so.
Thank you. Jessica Franklin Noyce. Okay.
Terrible with public speaking, so please bear with me. The Michigan.gov website on the COVID dashboard shows the total number of children from the beginning in Michigan, ages 0 to 19, who have had COVID is 302,883. According to the United States Census Bureau, the total number of children 0 to 18 in Michigan is an estimated 2,160,925. That would mean 14% of children in Michigan have had COVID. Of that 14% of children with COVID, 29 or 0.009% have died with COVID. I did not get into the comorbidities of all of this, but that's just on the basic facts on the website, 0.009%. That means we can reasonably say that COVID is not life-threatening in children, and our children should be your only concern. I question the long-term effects of masking. The CDC's own website states a study of 60 elementary school children reported no adverse cardiovascular or pulmonary side effects among children while wearing a mask, a cloth face covering in a classroom for 30 consecutive minutes of instructional time. Our children are in class for more than 30 minutes and go much longer than that without a mask break. So how can we know what the actual long-term masking effects are, as the data seems inadequate at this time? Masking should be a personal medical choice that each family should have the right to make after weighing the pros and cons and researching the data. It is not one that should be made for us by a board who haven't explained their logic for already making a medical decision for our children, other than saying we continue to monitor the data and the guidance. I hope each of you take time to research what data is being used and who the guidance is coming from, and then share that specific information and data with the public. If you do decide to continue making medical decisions for my child, like masking, I would like to know what the plan will be for mask breaks during inclement weather. My middle school child was not provided a mask break last Monday due to weather. If you're going to deny children access to fresh air outside, I would like to know what the alternative for indoor mask breaks will be. Additionally, what other strategies has the district considered, other than masking and quarantines, that I'm not sure are that legal? I thought the district had received COVID-19 funds and the bond proposal for the building improvements was passed. Have you considered using any of those funds for air filtration systems if you are worried about COVID in our schools? Lastly, is there a way that we can review the specifics of the test to stay policy prior to becoming an active policy if it's still being considered? I thought I had heard it was being considered during a previous board meeting, but I could not find it in the meeting minutes, so I'm not sure if I missed something. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Okay. Student report, Sunny.
All right, not that much to talk about around here, because we had 3 weeks off. But for miscellaneous, counseling was offered to those struggling with illness after the break. For clubs, NHS is their Salvation Army toy shop in Belrington has finished for the holidays. They're setting up new events soon, including notes to healthcare workers, and they're helping set up and run the blood drive at the end of January. For student government, they're working on awards for the state conference at the end of February, working on presentation on Panther Pack for the regional competition next week. Yearbook ordering is still available. They're finishing up their winter spreads, and prices have been raised for late orders. For FCCLA, they have put feminine products carts in all the girls' bathrooms and the academic wings at DHS. Academics, winter break was from December 19th through January 3rd. Starting process for scheduling for 2022-2023 school year has already started. Finals at the end of the first semester is at the end of this week. Teachers and students preparing for the start of a new semester and term at the end of this week. And then half days on January 13th and 14th for record and finals days. And no school next Monday for MLK Day. Athletics wise, we have DeWitt basketball is off to a great start and takes on EL. East Lansing at home on Thursday, which has already happened. Girls basketball is in session and practicing as well, and so is girls softball. DeWitt ice hockey and wrestling is in season, and DeWitt bowling plays East Lansing on last Friday, January 7th.
Thank you. Consent agenda. It's the recommendation by, Shama Speaker that the Board of Education approve, adopt, and accept the following items for immediate implementation and appropriate action as presented. Approval of the minutes from the special meeting on December 15th, 2021. Treasurer's report, bills for payment for the month of December 2021. Treasurer reviewed the checks, ACH debits, and purchase card for the month of 2021. The month of December 2021. And to approve the out-of-state overnight trip request for the DeWitt High School baseball program to St. Petersburg, Florida. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion about those items? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is our discussion about the COVID protocols. I don't know if you want me to, you plan to take that?
It doesn't matter?
All right, go for it.
Okay, so we have several things that I would like to discuss. I think the first and foremost is talking about our mask procedure feedback. If the board feels that there's a need for additional feedback and how we would like to proceed with that. So there are a couple of different options that we can do, but I know that it's possible to have another meeting where it's on the agenda. There has been some one-on-one discussion about if we would want to require masks or having a mask section, and if we would want to do that in a larger space. There's also the possibility of not having a board meeting, but just a kind of an open virtual forum. With that, we can limit time to 2 minutes. People can come on and say, as long as we have a common date where the majority of you can at least listen in, but no action items. So there's that possibility. So I know we've done a survey, we've answered or received several hundred emails, and we've had a lot of public participation, but we have also received some emails that people don't feel comfortable in attending or discussing it. So I just wanted to see how do we want to proceed as far as masks are concerned. Do you want to give me some different guidance? Do you want to have an additional meeting? How would you like to proceed as far as that's concerned?
You said something about a section. What do you, can you tell me?
So there were some conversations about, well, we should mandate masks so people feel comfortable, but then people that don't want to wear masks might not come. So we could have it in a large enough space, like for example, the high school gym, to where there's a section where people are masking and social distancing. Or maybe because it was recommended by MDE and the health department to try to avoid large gatherings, to do something virtually. So I mean, if we're feeling like we need more feedback, or if you're wanting to look at different guidance, I just would like to know how the board would like to proceed there.
So you're asking if we want a community session to have more discussion about
Correct.
what, okay.
And what that might look like.
I mean, I'll tell you, we've got, like you said, about 500 emails, we've got about 20 hours of public comment. And I feel like we have a pretty good idea where things stand. I know we're hearing from people that we're not listening. I think that's just not true. We're listening. We just, at least from my perspective, I just don't feel comfortable making a change in our mask policy at this point, given where things are headed. I hate wearing masks, but I'm doing it because I think it's the safest thing to do. I don't know that a public forum is going to be, I don't know we're going to learn more information. I get it. I understand where a lot of people, we differ from our policy. So I'm not sure that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I am all for listening to as much feedback as we can possibly get. I really am. I guess I would just kind of agree with Jason on one aspect of what are we going to learn that's different from what we've already heard. And if there is something, and even if there's not, I'm okay with that. I'm always willing to listen. I've spoken with many of you in person, on the phone, through emails. I'm happy to do that. I feel like it's my job as a person who's elected to this board. And I think I've also said to many of you, even if I don't agree with you, I'll always listen to you. And so I am happy to do some type, even a virtual forum, if people would feel more comfortable that way. But again, I don't know if there's information out there that we're missing. And that's what I'm trying to get. If there is, I know I appreciate when you all even bring studies and things. We read everything. We read it. I can tell you, I can assure you, we read every word of every email, at least I do. I can tell you that. I listen to every voicemail I get, all of it. And just, if I don't respond to the emails, because if I respond to one, I don't feel comfortable, I don't respond to all. And I just don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. But I'm happy to have phone conversations with people. I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to do public forums. But, you know, I'm kind of with Jason. And I think what people heard I listened to every word that everybody said today. Not one person mentioned anyone outside of kids. And unfortunately, we have 3,200 kids here. We also have 300 faculty and staff. And it's very important. Okay, and I heard from some of the comments that as age progresses, the risk progresses. We have people in here who are high risk, who are teachers. We have a responsibility to those people as well, not just kids. I am a parent of 2 young children here. I am. And I don't get the luxury of putting on my dad hat when I sit at this table. For 7 years on this board, there have been many times.
COVID is here to stay. Now that vaccines are available for adults and children, we're digging our feet in to say, that we're gonna do this forever because this is the way to protect people, while kids are showing up to school with cloth masks underneath their nose. So I believe COVID is real. I believe that certain masks help when worn properly, but that's not necessarily what we're seeing. And the minute kids walk out of school and they're at Bigby, they're mask free, or they're at Ford Field and they're mask free. So the struggle that I have is not that I don't want to protect teachers or that I don't want to do everything right. I think the politically correct thing to do is to have a mask policy. But I would push back to say, if this is our policy, what's our end game? When are we going to revisit that, and what needs to happen to eliminate that? And if we don't have that answer, we're saying masks forever. And that's the discussion that I would like to have.
So, I mean, I think that's what when we first did the policy was first generated. It has like a sliding scale. Right? So if the cases were low, we wouldn't have masks, depending on the grade.
Those numbers are so low, Jason,
I know,
that we
but
are never going to see those
think about when that
numbers.
policy was first issued, though. The numbers, we wouldn't have a mask requirement.
So should we revisit that and raise the number? And I
Well, we
think
wouldn't
that
have
that's
this
the fear and frustration. Pardon?
As of the summertime, we wouldn't have had a mask.
That's why it started out without a mask mandate, because the numbers were below what the threshold was. So one of the things that, we're trying to have a discussion up here. So one of the things that we looked at was the metrics, and we're actually not in alignment with CDC 100%, because they're actually saying regardless of vaccination and regardless of transmission level. So one of the things we have is only under the high is universally recommended. They actually recommend universally for all levels. So, you know, one of the things that we've asked the task force to come back with this next meeting, which is on Wednesday, is what other metrics could we use? And I know that early on it was discussed, you know, death rate, and I don't want to use death rate as a metric, but hospitalizations or, and the other thing is, you know, I've been looking at vaccination rate, but unfortunately for our 5 to 12-year-olds, when they're only like 30% of partially vaccinated. So we don't even have that population that's even fully vaccinated yet. And, you know, we are seeing those numbers climb as well. So I think that, you know, we do need to pay attention to those other metrics. So
What do you think? I mean, what are you thinking for how would you measure it for when we get rid of masks? I mean, I'm seriously open.
Yeah, and you know what, I don't have that answer, but I think it's, if we want to revisit it in February, we could do some research and come up with some ideas. I just think that continuing the mask policy for the reasons that we're using, it will be here forever. And I think that we have to come up with, I believe in personal choice. I mean, for me, it's not a metric, it's personal choice, especially because the vaccines are available and boosters are available. And I don't wear a mask because I want to be authentic and not have someone see me in the grocery store without a mask and come here with a mask. So for me, it's about being consistent. It's not about being irresponsible. It's about my personal choice. So that's why I do what I do, and apparently I'm a bit rebellious. But I don't know. I don't know what the metric should be, and I don't know that a metric is what we should use now that vaccines are available. And treatment. So Brad's not here to chime in because I think that, and I'm not going to speak for Brad, but just based on the last meeting, I know he was interested in furthering the conversation. So I don't think tonight my lone voice is going to change anything, and I know you have some other things to talk about with regard to COVID protocols that I think may be helpful and beneficial. But
well, it would be helpful to determine if we want to move forward with more public input or if we just want to start looking at metrics. Because if you think about, I mean, we're now in January and we have to arrange schedules to be able to, if we're going to do a forum or do a meeting. So I've heard from two of you that you feel that, you know, it's the input we've had is is good. We've had it from both sides. We've had a lot of it.
I don't need a forum. I think we're hearing everything we're going to hear. And if we were to have a forum, the only reason I would do that is if we made the decision on if we're going to go with the majority of the public having a position. Otherwise, I don't think that there's any benefit from having a forum, because we already know how people feel.
I agree with her. I think we've heard what we're gonna hear.
So all eyes are on me.
Mark,
We have a COVID task force that we put together. I'd like to see us use it in a way that is effective, that if there's an idea of looking at other metrics, then let's do that. I think that people can debate it however they want it, they can slice it however they want it. They didn't like the way the survey questions were worded. They liked the way the survey questions were worded. People spoke in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so we have an idea based on the survey what people think. We don't know technically if people's thoughts have changed between the survey and today. We've heard people in the audience talk about loss of life, where we're at with this situation with Craig. We've all got personal stories, right? So I sit in a place that I would say, okay, if there's another metric that we could use, another piece of information that we could use to further educate ourselves, share that information with the public, it might not sway them, but it may give them an understanding for why we sit and make the decision that we make. I don't think anybody up here is making a decision because it's going to get me reelected, or it's the fun thing to do. I think to what the point was, it's about safety. So if we're going to continue to move in that space, it's like having a strategic plan. We can't always operate the district where we always operated it, right? So we have to look at it and figure out how we can evolve. You evolve by getting additional information. So if there are additional metrics that folks think that we should look at, then I say use the COVID task force to examine those things. Like I said, actually get in a room and figure it out, or come to some conclusion. Let's bring people who are perhaps more educated than the folks in the room in this space, if possible, to give us the information that we don't have, because we can get one perspective from an article, and anybody that knows research, you can take those numbers, you can spin it however you want. You can get a different perspective from a media perspective, and that could be spun a different way. Let's figure out if there's another metric, and if that determines that we move. So, I'll be honest, I could go either way. I could get in a room and with masked folks or virtually and say, let's hear what the community has to say. In some ways, I think that could be really beneficial. In some ways, I think it could be very divisive to the community at large. I think it's already divisive in some ways because folks are having to make decisions about how large and how small their circles are because of where COVID has placed us, right? It's not something any of us picked. It's a situation we have to deal with today. It's my hope and prayer that we don't have to live with it forever. But we're going to have to do some things to figure out if we got a stretcher in front of us, what are we going to do to deal with it? So I say metrics. I say let's use the task force. Let's see if we can put our common beliefs, our common thoughts and threads together to figure out what other things could we look at or set of things, and see if that drives us in a different direction.
So will you come back with a recommendation from the task force? Is that
well, so the problem is that I think that the task force varies enough that I don't know if we could come back with one recommendation, but I think I could come back with 3 and then one that
could be all right.
Yeah.
That'd be better.
Will they meet before our next meeting?
We meet on Wednesday.
Is that something you would do at that Wednesday meeting?
That's on the agenda.
Okay.
So that was on the agenda from the last time. We talked about are there different metrics? Everybody was supposed to kind of maybe look at different metrics that were out there and bring them back. And if we don't have several that are brought back, we could spend time during that meeting to maybe do a little bit of research as well.
So I guess if you think of what you're thinking, maybe let Shauna know so she can present that to
Sure.
the task force.
Yeah, so if any of you have any ideas or have seen, I've researched what other states or counties, are using or doing. Even within our own county, there are some districts that are doing other things. And the problem is that PW is a lot smaller than what we are, and they have different numbers than what we have. But yeah, so that's the plan. The next item is to talk a little bit about quarantines and test to stay. These are kind of updates, but if you want to give guidance or have some questions. So unfortunately, I'm frustrated with Mid-Michigan District Health Department because we found out on Friday that they were probably going to be going with the CDC guidance, but we got it today because And I understand Dr. Morse wanted to really look at everything and think about, okay, school settings and take into consideration things like athletics, lunches, and those things. So just about 2 hours ago, so for the last hour before the board meeting, I was just really trying to read, trying to dissect, think about what that looks. Haven't even really had a chance to sit down and discuss things with cabinet. Because I really feel like what they've done is more restrictive than what we're already doing as far as quarantines. And that's because even though they're going to 5 days, they're saying on days 6 through 10, they recommend strict masking for kids on those days, which means, which is no big deal. A kid could sit through 5 days of band just fingering and not playing an instrument, but we don't have the staff or the space to put those kids to spread out to have lunch. So really kind of feeling hands are tied there. So we're taking a look at that. I did send Dr. Morris, Liz Braddock, and Becky Stoddard, who are the ones that are giving us guidance, and usually we can ask questions and they can kind of give additional guidance. So I made it known that this feels more restrictive than what we're already doing, because the modified quarantines have mask, unmasked, and less masks. The quarantines are down. And I think that one of the discussions that we need to think about is, okay, do we come back at day 6 and just ignore having to have the extra space, right? Because we know that, especially if it's a school issued quarantine, because a lot of those don't turn positive, or do we not issue school-based quarantines? So those are all kind of things that we need to have a discussion on and talk about, because we haven't really swayed away from the CDC guidance, or I'm sorry, the Mid-Michigan District Health Department guidance. But while it sounds great, it sounds like all kids are only going to be in quarantine 5 days. When you get down to it, it's more strict. And then also, for example, staff hadn't had quarantine if they were vaccinated, and now it's vaccinated and boosted. So it feels like the requirements are greater. So again, I've only spent about an hour and a half reading through them. I spent all weekend reading over CDC, but then, this last hour and a half beforehand, it was really trying to diagnose into Mid-Michigan District Health Department. And as of, I don't know, I got them maybe an hour after cabinet. They weren't even posted on their website yet, so it was just Dr. Moore sending them out to the RISAs, and the RISAs sending them to superintendent. So.
And so far, we have followed what the Michigan Health
So far,
Department has done.
we have.
They come in the form of recommendation.
Yes.
We've followed that.
Yes, we have followed it. The only thing that we haven't done, we've been trying to do, and then there's been discussion about that, is, so with the last 2 modified guidances, they have recommended the test to stay. So for most of the guidance, they have visuals and they have a track that's the safest and the alternative route. So for most of the choices, we have done the alternative route because we've tried to get kids back to school as quickly as possible. But we have not done the alternative route in the testing because we have not been able to do that. So one of the things I talked about at the last meeting is I can't ask the offices to do one more thing. Like, for example, today, principals, and this week has been bad, principals and secretaries have been inundated with positive cases and quarantines. We have 73 active cases, that's the highest it's ever been. High school's close to 30. I know St. John's isn't having school at the high school tomorrow. I hope I don't misstep by saying that. I got a message that they're going to have to close because of the number of cases at the high school, and to be quite honest with you, I'm getting really worried. I'm getting more worried about the number of staff that are out with COVID than students, just because we need staff to run. And while it sounds great in theory to just close a building to where we're actually 2 buildings, we're just really holding on. While in theory it might sound good, let's go remote in those 2, but if those 2 have students in other buildings and child care, like, it's a bigger, it's a domino effect, it's a systemic issue. So, the cases are high, they're busy, and I can't ask secretaries or someone to add testing in the morning on. So that's why we posted it. Deb and I have interviewed 3 individuals for that position. All would be great for that position. All had medical background, nursing background, and 2 have declined. That morning time is hard because we need someone consistently here from 7 to 8:30 to test. And the 3rd person can't do Wednesdays, and I said, you know what, we'll do 4 days a week, or Deb and I will test 1 day a week, or we'll figure it out. So called to offer her the job, and we haven't heard back from her yet. So that's still a work in progress. We're still trying to secure someone. It's very much needed, not only to get kids back, but to also the quarantining is becoming the contact tracing. So even if we didn't quarantine, we still have to contact trace, and we still have to notify parents, and it is really, really time consuming.
So that seems like a huge priority. If we can get the test to stay, then we can, at least one of my concerns, I don't like that idea of quarantining healthy kids, basically, particularly given the number who are coming back positive, which is really low.
Yes.
So the test to stay seems like it's a key.
It's key. We are out of tests right now, so those have been on order since the 17th. You know, I should have soon, hopefully within the next week, because I've been calling them on the phone, additional test kits for the test to stay program. And we've been doing, just so you know, test to stay for staff right now. So we, almost every building is testing to stay because that's how short-staffed we are. So they come in the morning, they've been exposed, they test to stay. But in addition to that, I think I mentioned it, I did sign up for the backpack program, and so that is individual. I think there are 2, it's a series of 2 take-home tests, so they're individual tests. So we'll first deploy those to staff, and then any family that wants to come through and pick them up, we'll do some sort of drive-through. They're meant to go in backpacks, but instead of just placing them in all backpacks or teachers having to put that on their plate as far as who wants them, who doesn't want them, we'll just do a drive-through at a certain time. I'll stand out there, and anybody that wants them can swing through a certain time and pick them up. So,
is that just a service to give people tests, or does that test somehow relate to the kid being able to?
so both. So we are, according to their guidance, families can use an at-home test and show us at-home test results for tests to come back. So, and we've already been doing that. So, and right now with the new guidelines, they can test on days 6 or 7 and come back on day 8. So as long as families do, so even though we're not testing, families have been able to do their own test.
And does that change at all with the new one that was issued today?
Well, the one that was issued today is they can test on day 6 through 10 every other day. So it's not test every day. And then certain kids, and I still have to go through the guidance, certain kids wouldn't even have to, if it's a school contact, they wouldn't have to quarantine at all. They could come back on day 1 as long as they test to stay and then test every other day. So, so close contacts from school would basically not have to do any quarantining as long as they test to stay.
Home
or school test. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm trying to do everything we can do to get kids back. And you know, Jody McKean and I had a conversation because when he saw the new guidance, he's like, well, what we're doing now is better than this. Do we have to adopt that? And I mean, I want to try to do what's going to get kids back, you know, trying to stay in line with some of the recommendations, but also get kids back as soon as possible. So that's kind of an update. I don't know if you have any questions about either one of those things.
I just want to make sure that I understand, because I feel like there's always so much.
There is so much.
The difference between what we're doing now versus the guidelines that were issued today are exactly what?
So again, I have to go through them in more detail, but right now, kids can come back on day 8 if they have a negative test, if it's a school close contact. This is not positive kids, we're only talking quarantine. So isolation is for positive kids, quarantining is for close contacts. With the new guidance, they can come back at day 1, but there's some talk in here about days 1 through 10 or 6 through 10, depending on which you go with, them having to stay masked, tight-fitting mask.
So just to back up, you're saying a kid that is exposed with the new guidance, they can stay in school, but when they get to day 6?
So it's if they've been exposed at school, and I have to read through, here's the chart. So if they've been exposed at school and they're not vaccinated, they have to do a 5-day quarantine and they can come back at 6. So that means 6 through 10, okay, with this, 6 through 10, they're required to be masked pretty much at all times. So the lunches are problematic, okay, because we don't have an alternative place for kids to eat, okay? So the old guidance is they can come back on day 8 and there's nothing about the lunch stuff we have to worry about. Now, if they are, if they've completed, if they're 18 or older and have had their doses and their booster, they don't have to vaccinate at all, or have to quarantine at all. And if they are 5 to 7 years old and have completed their primary booster, they don't have to quarantine at all. Or if they have confirmed positive, they don't have to quarantine at all. And I can share with you, so they put together.
What was the last one?
If they have had a viral test, a positive viral test of the disease in the last 90 days.
Gotcha.
So, have they posted them yet? So as of right before the board meeting, they have not posted this communication. So I can share it with the board. I can share the updates, but I do have clarification questions going out to. So it's basically this document that says updated January 10th of 2020 that basically outlines quarantine, isolation, and all their protocols.
Are those new guidelines, are those specific to Mid-Michigan Health Department? Are they specific, or are they adopted by health departments statewide, or what are?
So I have not seen the Michigan guidance. So Michigan basically told their local health departments that, told the local health departments that they were supposed to have a meeting at 9 on Friday, and because CDC didn't have their meeting with the state health department. So if it's day 5, you've either tested positive or you're showing symptoms, then don't come to school. And then mask every place else, maybe lunch, and see what happens.
Can I jump to something I think that you're going to talk about? Were you going to talk about the staff quarantine policy?
Well, so the staff quarantine, we're already doing what the CDC says because of Public Act 339, staff is automatically associated with the CDC. So for staff, it's 5-day. Staff can isolate during lunch, right? They can eat in their lunchroom unmasked and not have to, or in their classroom or their car or whatnot. So staff can isolate, that's not a problem. So staff is following the CDC guidance because we have to.
I struggle to quarantine children longer than we're quarantining teachers. So I struggle to quarantine healthy kids at all, which goes to the test to stay policy, and hopefully that will resolve that. But in the meantime, I think we should be consistent with the 5-day quarantine, and if that means that they have to take their mask off to eat, then that's what they have to do.
When do you think how quickly do you typically hear back from Dr. Morse on this?
She usually gets back to me soon, but the problem is that, I was really hoping for this, because we had a cabinet meeting and we had this meeting. I was really hoping for Sunday so I could put stuff together for cabinet. And we discussed things at cabinet, but we didn't have the guidance. And so that's one of the things we need to remember is that, we try to stay consistent, but the buildings are different. The kids are different. The age group, and so at the elementary we have kids that are more in cohorts or groups, but at the middle school and high school, they aren't. But they consistently all said, because I sent out a message, they consistently all said, we can't figure out the lunches. So if we can't figure out the lunches, then I don't really want to stay with the 10-day, then it's a 10-day quarantine, right? And so I really don't want to stay, with the 10-day quarantine. The CDC has said 5 days, I'd like to get it down to 5 days, but I also want to make sure that we're being we're being safe.
So it sounds like the answer is you have to wait to see what the health department comes back with.
Yeah, and then I want to get all the cabinet on board, but just so you guys know, these are discussions that we're having. So we're having school-based and people have to remember, and I think the public has to remember, that school-based contacts are different than out-of-school-based contacts, because the majority of them don't flip to positive, whereas being exposed at home is completely different. So if for some reason we decide, okay, you're going to come back on, it's really day 7, because exposure and or positive test, exposure and or positive test or symptoms all start at 0. And then the next day is day 1. So 1 through 5 they quarantine, and then they come back on the 6th day, but to me it's really day 7 because there's day 0 that's in there.
So it's a week after.
We've made it through by that time 7 days. So like I feel comfortable with if it's a school-based close contact, because we're masking, right? It'd be different if we weren't masking, but because we're masking, if it's a school-based contact, that we don't worry about the lunches. It's kind of where I am. Which is different than the guidance. So I did send that to Dr. Morse, and what they'll say is it's a recommendation. You can do what you want to do, but we have been trying to stay with recommendations because of that immunity as far as if something were to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that we couldn't change something. So if we're noticing a spike based on school-based contacts, then maybe what we're doing with school-based quarantines needs to change. But I wanted to put that out there that we might vary from the guidance a little bit, because I think we're all on board with getting kids back sooner. Just want to do it safely.
And they have no change in definitions for close contact of masked, unmasked, vaccinated.
No, so that's one of the questions I sent her, is like this new guidance. I'm like, before if we were masked, we got to cut it way down, and now this doesn't take into account for that. So is it the same or is it not the same? Yeah.
If you see those get posted, can you forward those?
For differences, or just, I can forward you without them even being posted, because, you're part of the board and these are documents that were sent to me. So I'm hoping they're on there.
I just checked and I
don't see them.
So I sent, as soon as we got them, because when I send out parent communication, I like to link the site, because if they update them, I don't want, so if I upload a document, make it a link, but then the health department updates it, then they don't get the update. So I always like to link from the health department directly. And so I communicated last night to parents with the mask plan that by midweek, I would hope to have updates with them. And the last thing I wanted to do was send out 2 different communications, or maybe I send out something where I thought I was interpreting it, but then the health department interpreted it differently. So I can send you what was sent to me, but when I send out parent communication, that's kind of what I'm waiting on, is I always like to link directly from the health department site. So if it is updated, parents get that update. But I'll forward you all tonight what was sent to me.
So you're waiting for the guidance to come from the health department?
Well, the guidance has come, but I sent clarification questions. Well, what if we're masked, or this seems like it's more strict than what we were already doing, and what do you advise for us to do about lunches? So, yeah, I'm trying to figure that piece out. And then I also sent some ideas to cabinet. Again, this is not just me making a decision. This is me, I have a meeting with actually Brian tomorrow morning. This is one of the topics we'll be talking about on our agenda. So, these are things that I try to vet out with the stakeholder groups and people, and because it could potentially be a big variation.
So if the health department comes back and they don't waver on this at all, that kids need to be masked during lunch or separated, or stay in accordance with what they've issued today, you're going to be faced with making a decision to, for the first time, be inconsistent with the health department.
Again, we're already a little inconsistent, because the health department and the CDC says universal masking no matter the transmission levels. So we've stayed close, but we vary some. I just, our goal is to maximize in-person instruction as much as possible. Don't jeopardize the safety. And the thing I see is that if we did something like this, we have to have a safety valve, meaning that if we start seeing a spike, then wait a minute, this is problematic.
Do you need to hear from us on how we feel if this doesn't change?
If you want to give me input, you can. I mean, that's why we're discussing it, but I mean, I really trust, my cabinet as far as, okay, let's talk about what this looks like. Because we all have the same goal at the cabinet, is to maximize face-to-face instruction. But you are the board, and if you want to give me input, or if you want to give me a directive even, you are always welcome to do that. I'm trying to use avenues. So if you want to,
Well, you know how I feel. I would like to see it be a little different than the health department guidance and be consistent with teacher quarantines in 5 days. And if we can't accommodate the lunches, then we can't accommodate it, and we waiver from the recommendation.
I totally get what you're saying. I remain reluctant to stray too far from the health department. But I'm with you. I'm trying to think of the solution to deal with this. It basically comes down to lunches.
and I'm hoping that maybe so here's the problem. Talk about being transparent or whatnot. So this is where we were with snacks, right? So snacks were getting us over, and we did have someone from the health department tell 2 different staff members, "Well, try this," right? So here we are, really doing whatever we can do to get students in school and full in person, and trying whatever we can. So I don't know what they'll get back to me with. But I am kind of at a point to where I feel like one of 2 things. We either need to maybe not issue school close contact quarantines. So we'll still communicate they were close contact, but because we've looked at enough research to say that they don't necessarily flip positive. And I think there aren't that many of them as it is. Or we don't worry about the lunches.
I'm comfortable with both.
Now, I will tell you, I don't feel comfortable eliminating school close contacts if we're not masked, because there's more transmission that's available. But if we're masked, I do feel comfortable with that.
Is there any additional, I know we're tight on space in some of the buildings, but I mean, is there more space to spread? Is that the issue?
It's space and staff. So, I mean, we barely have enough lunchroom coverage. We have principals that are covering lunches. I've been over to the buildings to help with lunches. I mean, so there's not additional staff for another place. If it were just 1 or 2 students, they might be able to eat in a place in the office, or they might be able to eat in the conference room. It's more students, so it's staffing and location. And so, one principal's like, well, I've got an extra table, but the most you can put at that table is, 20. So it's a combination of the 2.
I just don't know how we keep a kid out of school from learning longer than we keep a teacher out of school. It's just, it just feels so wrong. I mean, that's what the school is here for. It's here for the kids. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not. I just think that there are lots of stakeholders that need to be considered, and we do need our building staff so that we can teach the kids, and that cannot be forgotten.
Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
No. But I think that our absolute primary concern is educating children.
And it is, but what I will tell you is, we've got to be cognizant, because if those kids are coming and if they are sick, then we need full staff to educate the kids. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg. So, I get that. So if you want to provide any additional thoughts before we move on to the next item, or I can send this out. And then obviously, I was hoping to send out communication to families on Wednesday. Whenever I send out communication to families, I always, try to update you on what's going out. So But I feel like I'm a little stuck right now, and so right now we're holding until we can get communication out and I can get clarification.
I think it'd be helpful for all of us to see.
I'll get those, yeah. Because I would welcome additional perspectives. And again, I've had plenty of time to go through CDC, and so when I went through that, I was really excited because I'm like, all right, we're in. But then when I thought, okay, here it is for us, and I'd be curious to see, what the state health department has done, and maybe some of the other surrounding health departments as well. So because they might have some variations that we could look at.
Are you still meeting periodically with the Michigan Health Department?
So the problem is so we had, every Thursday we have a meeting. So I had a meeting Thursday, basically they said the guidance is coming. And then Friday morning, the county soups had a meeting with just our county people. So yeah, we're meeting pretty regularly, but the problem is this came hot off the press just a few hours ago. So the other thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about, let me have my list to make sure we're getting them through all of them, is vaccine policy 8450.06 for staff. So one of the things that we have to be doing is making sure that we are making a reasonable best effort to put this policy in play for the emergency temporary standard. So even though there's not been a final decision that's been made as of right now, February 12th is the date that we're supposed to have something in play if it does stand. And that would mean that we have a board meeting after it's supposed to be in place. So I'm going to be sharing with you some rough drafts on a board policy as well as administrative guidelines. Now we have two different options that Neola has offered, and I really think and need to strongly recommend that we choose the option where vaccination is not mandatory. So
it's vaccine or test?
It's vaccine or test. And so, I can't control that, but it would be weekly testing, district would pay for it. So a couple of things that we're doing to make sure, because it's a fine multiplied by each count. And so, $7,000 times, 200 and some staff can get pretty expensive for a district. So one of the things that I'm going to be working on is a video just to kind of explain what we're doing and why we're doing it for staff, and then with a survey that at this time will be optional to complete on if you're vaccinated, when those dates were. So all the information we would need if this goes into play. And then if it does go into play, we would resend the link saying it's due by such and such date. But this would really help the business office as far as people who are willing to submit that information, that we can get that and we can start collecting that. So Jennifer Lee and I and Rob's been involved in this too. I've been looking at this. Is another thing on my agenda to talk with Brian tomorrow with as well. But these are policies that come from Neola. And basically, at the end of the policy, it will say this policy will cease to be in effect upon expiration of the ETS. So when ETS goes away, the policy goes away. It's not something that's in forever. We have too many staff that don't want to vaccinate, and I think we need to honor that and give them an option. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that you're probably going to see this policy, and depending on where we are, it might need to be an emergency, which we've been told we can do, where it's an adoption and not a first read, second read.
My 2 cents is the Supreme Court's going to strike it down, so
I'm hoping.
it won't be an issue.
I'm hoping. So, but we need to kind of
I think
play the game.
It's prudent to prepare for it.
And if we do vote on this policy, as we talked about at other meetings, we want to make sure that it's available for people to see.
Yeah, so I've already talked to Deb about that, and we can make it a PDF and post it with it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the other policies have been on the agenda, but we've talked with Pat from Neola about, since we have the interest, we've never really had the interest before, but since we have it, and he suggested that we can download this PDF and put up so they can actually see it.
Okay.
All right, so board meeting recommendations. So later on in the action, but before we get there, one of the things that we've started to do since, I don't know, a few months ago when it was recommended that we film or not film, we live stream the board meetings. So that's something I want to discuss and kind of have a discussion before we get to an action item, and I want to talk about the recommendation. So as of right now, they're streamed, and so Sherry is not supposed to check the box to where they're saved, they're just streamed. And Sherry is a tech guru and knew that, that meetings had to be saved for 30 days or until the minutes were approved. And so she was saving them for 30 days, which, I didn't realize that they were being saved. And so then we got guidance to say that they don't need to be saved, that's okay, that the meeting minutes are the official minutes, but we would just need to kind of inform the audience. And so I did have a few parents reach out. Some that couldn't be here at the meeting that wanted access, and another one that was here at the meeting that wanted access. And my response was the same to, all of them, that it's for streaming purposes only. We don't save and we don't post. So, but there is an interest, and so I want to have some discussion on what you think about that. I know that there are varying viewpoints. I will be making a recommendation in the action items that if we're deciding to film, we download, we save, and we post within a week. Then people have access, and we don't have to worry about it. We've been accused of transparency, and it's there. But again, you're a board, and you can have discussion, and you can vote differently. And I also would like to talk about how long we do this. I mean, I especially think that we need to continue streaming since they're recommending not getting into large group settings. But maybe when we get to, if we ever get to substantial or moderate, then we decide to no longer stream and record.
So I'm fully support. Let's record them. Let's put them on the website, and I think we do it forever, as far as I'm concerned. I'm serious.
I support that.
Yeah, as long as their staff bandwidth.
I was going to say, we might need to get some of the high school students trained in video editing, but Sherry does such a wonderful job. We appreciate her giving her evenings up to do that.
How long would the videos be remain posted? Is this like forever and ever?
Perpetuity.
Absolutely
I
possible.
don't know, until the end of the school year? Is there a space, because, are they done with YouTube, Sherry?
We can put as many as you want.
Okay.
The only recommendation is from the records retaining is that it needs to be at least 30 days.
Okay.
If we're going to record, it needs to be saved for at least 30 days. How long we want to keep it is completely up to you.
I support forever.
I support forever as well.
Support forever.
As long as we get away to house it.
So that'll be an action item later, and I think.
Thank you for that, by the way, for listening to people and for making that change and bringing it back to us. We appreciate it.
I'll do this in my update. So that's all the COVID items that I had.
All right, have some action items here. It's a recommendation by Superintendent Sean Spicker that the Board of Education approve the construction manager agreement between DeWitt Public Schools and Clark Construction Company for the 2022 building and site capital project as presented. We have a motion.
We have a quick presentation before we have a motion, so.
Go right ahead if you want. Good evening, Art Architect with Plant Ryan Crest over the owner's rep for the bond issue. As Dr. Spicker said, we have been engaged to provide project services to the school district for everything that comprises the bond. Rob has been working already on bond procurement, working with getting the bond sold. In the meantime, since November 2nd, when they did pass, Primary Press, along with the steering committee, Dr. Spicker and Sherry and a few others within the school district, have been going through all the proposals that were requested from CMs. In November, we issued can't hold this in at the same time. In early November, we issued an RFP to 5 different firms. And we have a pre-proposal meeting on November 30th, 5 construction management firms all attended, those being Rockford, Crispin, Granger, Clark, and Owen, Ames, Kimball. Proposals were due back to the district on the 13th of December, and 3 firms submitted, those being Rockford, OAK, Owens, Ames, and Clark. Granger and Crispin both voluntarily withdraw based on not having staff that adequately propose on the project. The last thing that we wanted to do was get involved and had issues staffing. They're seeing the same thing school districts are starting to see with having staff available on the project. So proposals were received on December 13th. As said, we reviewed them, went through all the clarifications, obviously worked with Shroon and the district's legal counsel when it comes to contract clarifications. On the 17th of December, the steering committee held interviews with all 3 contractors that did submit. All were given an hour to present, go through the proposal. Many of the contractors did go through very, very deep detail of the project, how they were going to tackle it, and also allowed it, the district to interview and talk to all those personnel that were going to be issued to your project. Part of the contract that we do come up with mandates that the contractor lists the personnel that will be on your project for the duration of the project, and there are actually penalties if they change those people. So we make sure it's not an interview and switch kind of system. We use a criteria-based selection system, which tries to quantify with a hard number different ratings that were set prior to the RFPs being issued. So we come into the interviews being able to easily determine who, and it wasn't easy, but make it easier to quantify the things that were important to the school district. So a culmination of about 2 months worth of work as far as formal RFPs, complying with statutory requirements in the state of Michigan. We bring to you the recommendation that you see it before you for Clark Construction Services for the 2021 bond program. What you see in front of you is actually only pre-construction services on an hourly not to exceed basis from now through 2024. The checkpoints that you'll be seeing coming forward is every bond, every bid pack, every project that comes through will actually come back to the board for review and approval. So as Clark bids out, first things out will be the turf and track. That will come before you likely in February, if not just after that, for issuance and getting those contracts going. Subsequently, as things come down the road, you'll see the architectural contract come due, and then every subsequent piece of construction. Is there any questions on the process where we got to? Questions on Clark Construction?
So Art, I'm going to ask you a question that I get everywhere I go.
Yep.
So you mentioned the football field and track. Is that going to be ready by fall?
Yes, sir. We're not going to have spring. We're working with Mike right now on trying to maybe have a little bit of track season and get them off site, getting on earlier as fast as humanly possible. We have to get on early. The other reason you guys will probably see us back here in February is release of materials. Right now, turf, knock on wood, has not had any huge issues like roofing, steel, on and on. So, yes, sir.
So you kind of answered my question, but I just want to make sure. So you referenced the amount in this, the $296,000 being pre-construction services only.
Correct.
And coming back with the contracts for board approval. Are they going to come, it sounded like what you said is that as they come in, they will come to us for approval versus as an entire package.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, is there an entire package amount for the construction manager that we're working within that has been determined? Because the letter said a reasonable amount has been set aside, and I would be interested in knowing that.
As budgeted, correct. So the total amount, there's no way to determine general condition costs, dumpsters, amount of porta potty for the entire bond. So that's why we truncate it in pieces. So it's literally pre-construction. So the turf and track's a great example. They need this much staff from here to here. It'll all be included in an amount that comes to you for approval. Where Rob and I track, we track the entire bond amount for staffing for the entire bond, all the general conditions, the construction piece, all the individual projects that are in the facility assessment. Those are pulled as we do projects. So yes, there's an entire budget track, and will be coming in with each piece. So turf and track will have 4 or 5 different trades. They'll all be bundled in one group. So you'll see all the trades, all the approved trades that Clark has gone through and done all the reconstruction.
And is there a penalty to the CM if the person leaves their job?
We get, so no one can control a staff member, right? So if someone leaves, we get to help select, they get to have a couple names. It's something contractually we put in because that was happening all the time. It was a lot of people coming, interviewing, their all-star interviewers.
Yeah.
Come, and then next thing you know, we'll look up this person to be, they're actually listed in the contract and they're staff.
But it's a reasonable thing, it's not,
I
if somebody leaves, they're not gonna be penalized.
No, not the individual person.
No, I didn't mean that, I meant the company, I mean, if somebody
Oh,
leaves.
no, not financially.
Okay.
We'd have to talk to Truman if we could do that or not. I don't think we could.
Any other questions?
Thanks for being here. I think I left with making the motion, requesting the motion, is that where I left it off?
So moved.
Support. Move and support, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure he had a chance to.
No,
get
I
that
just
before
didn't
you
know I
guys
was
voted.
here. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, it's the recommendation by Superintendent Shannon Spicker that the Board of Education approve for the 2022 building and site capital project. The superintendent should be allowed to approve change orders up to $50,000. All orders over $50,000 should be approved by the Board of Education. Further change orders that are at least $10,000 and approved by the superintendent will be reported to the Board of Education. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion, questions about how that works? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I modified this last one slightly based on our conversation a few minutes ago. Hopefully it makes sense. Correct me if you don't think it does.
Okay.
Recommendation by Superintendent Shannon Spickard that whenever the Board of Education meetings are live streamed, the video will be linked on the district's Board of Education website on or before 5 business days after the date of the meeting. So that would be, I just want to make sure I understand what this,
Within 5 business days.
after the date of the meeting.
So by next Monday, this will be posted.
Correct. I don't want Sherry to have to stay and do it the night.
No, yeah.
Right?
Right.
So, yeah. So within 5 business days.
Okay, got it. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Public communication for any subject. Public communication for any subject is the practice of the Board of Education. Permit persons in the audience to make statements concerning items not listed on the agenda at this time.
Start with Kelly Nathaway.
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 Okay. Oh, it's not on anyways, is it? Is it?
Should be close to the room.
Hello. Doesn't sound like it. I'm probably louder anyways. Okay. I haven't been here in a little while, so it's nice to see all you guys again. My board meetings have kind of combined with your guys's, so this week I could make it. So I'm just trying to be here for support of you guys. I think what I'm trying with my school is quarantines. I get your guys' frustration with quarantine, as you're saying, healthy kids are, my kid got sent home for 2 weeks, you know, nothing wrong with her, and by the time she got back, she's failing, you know, and it took us, well, we're still trying to get the grades back up, and that's been over a month. So one of the things I just wanted to kind of bring, and I know you love the facts and everything, but November 2nd, basically, Livingston County Schools basically changed their quarantine and lifted, and basically any of the students who that have been in contact
with the COVID positive individuals, they were allowed to go back to school. One thing that I thought was very interesting that they posted on there, they said over the 10,000 students that were quarantined since the beginning of the year to that November 2nd, out of that 10,000, 860 were only COVID tested positive. So that was less than 1%. And you had all these kids out of school not getting education just because they were next to somebody that actually tested positive. So again, it's just these quarantines, these guidelines, everything's changing. It's this, now it's 5 days. I think I've seen more people sicker this time than I think the last time, and we're actually going down on our rules, which confuses me a little bit. But as you guys were saying about the vaccines, with now they're being available to all these kids and everything, one thing I do want you to keep in mind as you're promoting this and wanting these kids to be vaccinated, we have kids dying right now with heart attacks, 13-year-olds. I have a 13-year-old died after the second shot, Michigan, Saginaw County. 15-year-old died after the second shot, heart attack. 16-year-old after the second shot, blood clots blocking blood vessels in both lungs. 11-year-old died after the Pfizer vaccine. 5-year-old died 4 days after the first dose. 15-year-old collapses during basketball tryouts, heart attack. Another 15-year-old in these were different states, not all Michigan, but in the United States. 2 15-year-olds, one with chest pains, heart attack, both at tryouts. Miscarriages are going up as you want to talk about adults. If you guys think this vaccine is great, that's okay, but as you can see, free choice should be made. And you guys, these kid commercials that are on, I don't watch TV, but I get on it, and them now putting these kids on TV and saying how they needed to get vaccinated and everything like that just makes me sick. I don't know how people can watch that. The big thing is I want to say, COVID-19 is not your enemy, fear is. You will not die one day sooner or one day later than God has planned for you. But He did not create you to live in fear. The Bible says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind.
Thank you.
Clay Coey.
You, your board. I had a question. If, per record retention, I know you said that you have to keep them on file for 30 days. How come on the 7th of January, that which did not exist, your words, that we did not do, also your words, magically conjures out of air on the 7th of January? This is a copy of the 23rd meeting. So before we go patting each other on the back, as if we're doing something novel by live feeding and posting, I'm not the most technologically savvy guy, but every live show I've ever done and every TikTok video you ever do automatically posts. So why does it take 5 days? Not that we don't trust you, but again, I don't. Are we editing them? No, I did review this one, it wasn't, thank you. But they should automatically upload. It's public. This is a public school. This is a public forum. You're a public school board. We're a public setting. We should be able to call up and say we'd like the meeting when John Dieter would televise them and get them at will. Or they can last forever, like you said, Jason. And that was the one thing I think I agree with you on tonight is leave them up there forever. Most people will not go back and review them. But a lot of people do, because words mean things. Speaking of words, I want to congratulate the board because some of you must have extremely lovely singing voices, and it's wonderful to finally hear them from you. When Dr. Spickard asks you for your input, give it. Okay? That's your chance to speak up, to object, to affirm, to do whatever. Not to sit there like a silent star chamber. That makes no sense. She wants your input. It is your job and your duty to speak up, as we do. Question your leaders. We're questioning you. You question us. Sometimes you preach at us, tell us to be civil. I think we have to understand that everybody out here in this audience is here because we care. You obviously are here because you care. Otherwise, why in the heck would you be on a school board? Don't you have better things to do with your time? So when Dr. Spickard asks you a question, because I had to ask her 5 times for that which I knew existed, knew it, yet they're ruse. And yes, ma'am, it was a ruse. Existed, it doesn't exist. That's nonsense. I do this every day. I know how to post a live feed. If you can post a TikTok video or a YouTube video, it automatically records. So why hide it? It's breaking down the trust, or what is left of it, that we have for you as representatives of this town and of this school, that we're trying to place back in you guys. But again, I always try to find some positive. I want to thank you all who did speak up. John, I don't agree with you at all, but you know what? You did give a good speech. Keep giving them. The only way, and I know, Mr. Handspike, you had mentioned the word divide. Okay? So what? So you're on one side, I'm on the other. That is how you create compromise. It isn't ever going to all be our way, and it's not all you can assuredly bet your life on it isn't going to be your way. There has to be a conversation, communication, open dialogue. Sometimes it's direct. Sometimes you don't like what comes out of my mouth, and I like what comes out of your mouth. But the only way you will bridge that divide is by communicating. So when it's open, let it be, and let it be open. We can take it, and you should be able to as well. We, unlike you, are not paid to be here, okay? But our taxes do go to make sure that you can sit there.
Thank you.
Guys, I would like to wish you all a happy new year, but this constant chasing our tail around a tree, it was humorous in the beginning. Now it's getting frustrating. It's time to be open, honest with each other, or it's just going to get louder and louder and louder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Theo, is it Randall or Rondell?
Randall.
Is it Randall? Okay.
I think you have to go home.
Chris Franklin.
You guys answer questions? Just a simple one? No? Okay. I'd like to know where we can find info for the test to stay policy. Is that on the school board website or individual school websites? Also, we'd like to know who makes up the COVID task force. We are under the assumption that only 2 public people are on that. The rest are school employees. Please, as a board, remember, there's differences between recommended and required, as you guys know, and have talked about that several times now. There's no mask mandate, there's mask recommendations. I don't want to wear a mask, I don't. If you think we should, and you can show us, this is why we recommend doing it, and this is why we are doing it. We don't agree with it, but at least we'll see your side of the story, and that would be appreciated. Dr. Spicker, I would like to know, with you being so concerned about lunch today, why the middle school is recommending, as of January 10th, 2022, that kids in close contact eat outside. It was 1 degree today at the wind chill. Why is that a recommendation to have kids eat outside? That is ridiculous. Lastly, Lisa, thank you for speaking up. We all appreciate that. Thank you.
Don Spear.
Thank you. My wife and I just moved to the DeWitt area about 2.5 months ago. We fell in love with this area after we retired. We moved from Alpena, Michigan, right here on your handy map. And we have our kids and our grandkids live in the Okemos area, and that's mainly what brought us here. So we're still interested in schools. Both my wife and I were teachers for 30-plus years. I did 30 years in the middle school. I think I should get an award for that. You know how those kids are. It was a great time. Anyway, I just want to thank each of you board members, whether I agree with you or not, for serving. It is such an important job. There's nothing more important than our kids. And whether the community agrees with you or not shouldn't determine what you do. You do in your heart what you think is best. And I happen to believe in masks. I happen to believe in vaccines. A lot of people in the audience do not. But that's not a reason for us to shut each other out. The only way that we can be successful in what we're doing is to keep talking to each other. And I'd like to commend the audience too, because I've seen a lot of stuff on TV where board meetings really get nuts. And I think they've handled themselves pretty well. So again, I thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Welcome to DeWitt.
Jared Rondeau.
Good evening, Jared Rondeau, 1325 West Geneva. I wanted to discuss a couple things. One of them being the public comment, how it was switched haphazardly in a failed attempt to try and limit how much time we'll have to speak up here. You guys can keep enforcing the 3-minute rule all you want. Your policy clearly states, as Mr. Holland stated, that it's 3 minutes per topic. I actually, when you guys switched that, I read it and I laughed. That how silly it was to change something, trying to limit us, and at the time you did it, completely opened up the door for us to stand here for as long as we want. You can go through and you can say, we have 3 minutes, that's fine. There's other routes that can be taken. We have clarification that it doesn't matter what the website says, that takes time to get updated, but it's your policy. You set, you adopt, word for word. If you want to get it out, you can read it in February, we'll read it aloud. By then, hopefully it doesn't get changed. We have hard copies. But that's one topic. Second topic, the comment, COVID, yes, it's real. A good friend of mine, best friend in high school, roommate in college, I was preparing myself to go to a student a couple months ago. I understand a lot of this. For a lot of you, this is just a bullet point on your resume. You, why are you here? I've seen your resume. It's impressive. You don't need to be here. It's a bullet point. Sometimes you're going to have to work, okay? This is the time you guys are going to have to work. This has never happened before. You're not going to be able to sit here quietly and allow this to happen. It's ruining our kids. Fast. Real fast. You got millions of dollars, figure out some filtration systems, figure it out. You don't need the masks. Research metrics. Of course, Shannon runs right to metrics. Metrics means numbers. Numbers, as Mr. Handspike said, are easy to twist, fabricate, do whatever the hell you want to get the numbers you want to make the policies or rules that you want. Slow the curve. Then it's the vaccine. Now you can dangle that carrot. Then what? It's going to be more boosters and more boosters and more garbage. Your one duty here is to protect his kids. There's nurses and doctors losing their jobs that are there to protect your friend. I understand Craig, he's sick. Wish him the best. Those doctors and nurses can lose their job because they don't want the vaccine. What? Teachers? They're immune to that? These people are saving your friend's life. They can lose their job tomorrow if they don't want the vaccine. Well, my kids don't matter because the teachers. I understand the teachers have to be here. This has nothing to do with the teachers. If somebody's immunocompromised, there's obviously things that can be happened. 3,500 kids, 300 teachers. Take the numbers. Shanna, quorum. If you have an issue with the quorum as opposed to where to host it, how to host it, just host it after 2 p.m. Your survey and data, we saw some pie graphs and stuff that are easily thrown together on Microsoft Word. Has the actual data been published, the hard numbers from that survey? Okay. As far as the task force, people, has anybody in this room actually seen or heard, know who's on the task force? How it was formed? Who picked the task force? How it's handled, conducted? Are those messages protected from FOIA? Some more topics. I'd like to finish. Thank you for speaking up. I would thank Mr. Stoddard as well, but he is not here. Again, we can't just sit here quietly. We won't. And Dr. Spicker, the first time I was up here, I asked for your resignation as a standing author. Have a great night.
Kia Randu.
All right. So as many of you already know, our son, who is a kindergartner at SRE, had an abrupt onset of neurological symptoms this past summer and continues to do to this day. On December 13th, our son was finally diagnosed with an IgG deficiency, which means that he's considered immunodeficient and more susceptible to viral and bacterial infections. Since the start of the school year, our son has had ongoing issues with bloody noses, dry, cracked lips, facial rashes, and oral ulcers while being masked at school. Last Thursday, we went back to U of M again to see his ENT for possible chronic sinusitis, to examine his nasal passages for ongoing bloody noses. To examine his nasal passages for ongoing bloody noses, and to assess his oral ulcers. Just so happened that our son had 2 ulcers in his mouth at the time of his appointment. He's now being referred for extensive autoimmune evaluation and possible biopsy of these ulcers. I understand that most children can tolerate 7 hours of mask wearing each and every day, but my child is not one of them, and my child matters too. All children have unique needs, and no child deserves to be discriminated against because of it. On December 2nd, we met with Dr. Spickard and a few other staff members regarding our concerns related to long-term masking of our son. During this meeting, it was suggested that we have our pediatrician fill out a mask exemption form if we had ongoing concerns about him wearing a mask. I acknowledge the fact that we knew that this was an option, but I also expressed several times during this meeting that my biggest concern with having a mask exemption is that my son will be treated differently because of it, and that if it was up to the parents, my son would not be the only child without a mask on at school, and he would not stick out like a sore thumb. I was told the following by Dr. Spickard during our meeting. Unfortunately, there are different guidelines for masked versus unmasked, versus vaccinated versus unvaccinated. There's different guidance that we have to follow. As far as saying not treated differently, unfortunately, there are some cases where that is happening. But one of the reasons we're doing the universal masking is so that we don't have to ask for vaccination status. We are trying to make sure all students look the same. Unfortunately, if a child has a mask exclusion, they do look different from the rest of the class because the rest of the class has a mask on. It was also confirmed during the meeting that there was only one other child at SRE with a mask exemption. My son comes home from school every single day with cracked, peeling lips. He has red bumps all over his chin and cheeks, and his mouth aches when he tries to eat or drink. He has 2 open wounds in his mouth right now, and his immune system isn't strong enough to help fight off any bacteria that might be growing inside of his mask during the day. How can any of you here tonight look at me in the eyes and tell me that you know what is best for my child? You don't. You don't know what we're going through as a family. We've watched our son deteriorate before our very own eyes, and I will do everything I can to advocate for him and all children with special needs throughout our community. I want to know who is responsible for looking out for the well-being of students with special needs, such as my son. I have my son's completed mask exemption form sitting right here with me. But I cannot get the courage to turn it in because I know that he's going to be treated differently. He's going to be discriminated against because of his special needs. I can't find it in myself to do this to him because you're already emotionally not well from this. It's all because this district has created a non-inclusive environment for all students. I'm begging you to stop telling me what is best for my son. Like I've said several times in past meetings, you do not know my son, and you sure as hell do not know what is best for him. I don't want to take the mask off other children, but I do want to take it off mine. Personal choice is the right choice. Please think about children with special needs such as mine when you preach that you're looking out for the well-being of all the children and the people in this district. You are not looking out for what is best for my child, and you are not creating an environment that is inclusive for all children.
It's been 140 days since the start of the school year, and not a single thing has changed. COVID isn't going anywhere, and it's time that we make this right again. My son matters. He's mattered. I don't know what to do. Like I said, I have a math grades uniform right here, and I don't know what to do. I shouldn't have to choose this. My son has tics. Tics. He's 5. Children in his class tell him to stop making noises. And now you want me to take the mask off him and make him look different. I don't know what to do. I want somebody to tell me what to do. I've asked you, Shanna. I asked you at that meeting, what am I supposed to do as a parent? I understand COVID is real, but my situation is real too. My child matters. You guys are not sticking up for my child. You're not looking out what's best for him. Thank you.
Superintendent report.
So as you saw from the presentation, Clark Construction is who we recommended. The interviews went really well. They checked off a lot of things, and I also just want to say that the owner came as well, which I think speaks highly to the organization, and very much a local group, and even a DeWitt parent. I can't remember which role the DeWitt parent served, but even a DeWitt parent that was on that team. So just wanted to update you on that. And then the other bond update, just the stadium design is almost nearly complete. And then I just want to address the ventilation, since that's something that's come up. You know, the bond and the process is a multi-year process. This involves stripping, mechanical and electrical work. We have a calendar that will take multiple years to get done. And so we don't have kids that are involved in construction their whole entire career. Now, with that being said, and that we know that those upgrades will be done, ventilation is one of the many layers of mitigation strategies, and Rick and Rob have done everything they can to make sure that the ventilation is up to code and supports the turnover that's needed. So just wanted to update you on that. As far as teaching and learning goes, I just want to take this opportunity to really praise our principals, teachers, and support staff. They have been going above and beyond to keep students in school, working with students in quarantine. Like I said earlier, testing to stay, covering for staff who have been out. So I just think that it's important that, I know this is board appreciation and we're appreciating everything that you're doing, but we want to continually to support our teachers, staff, and principals. This past week and this week I've been doing Pride Awards, so just a reminder is that's an opportunity that people can do Pride Awards for staff members who've made a difference. So I've enjoyed passing those out and then also getting into the classrooms. And our CLT that's coming up, I kind of hijacked part of that to do a safety training. So it's not a one and done. We're going to be looking at some ongoing safety training. So I've been meeting with both chiefs from the township and from the city, and we're working on about a half an hour to 40 minutes of training, but then giving teams and buildings some time to talk about what does that look like for their age group that they serve and the buildings that they serve. So we'll be talking about topics that include an overview of school safety, law enforcement response to violence, natural responses that we might have and how we can make muscle memory to do things to keep kids safe, basic principles and terminology, a review of threats and analysis, some talk about mass communication, and then we're going to have some time for them, like I said, to discuss and then submit questions. So then the chiefs and I can get together and do a frequently asked question and answer. That will also kind of guide additional trainings and what's needed based on the questions that they have. So again, CLTs are usually used for curriculum alignment, but talking with the principals, this is something that's needed, and wanted to work to get that in. So that'll be happening this month on the 19th, I think, is CLT. Yeah, 19th. And let's see what else. We had a couple of questions. So the question or comment about visitors, again, so the discussion about teacher safety or teacher comfort level is in regards to room parents. So again, we have lots of conversations at cabinet meetings. We meet monthly, and so that's where that came up at. But as far as our policies and the principals are in charge of making sure that our policies are in place. And really, the policies have not changed. A lot of the safety or visitor policies were done because of active shooter and active school violence, not because of COVID. And then we also communicated out via newsletter as well as school PowerPoints on what school looks like in each of the buildings. So again, if a parent has a request to do a visit or has a meeting, they would do that through the principals. That's practice. And then test to stay, and just we talked about that, but the update is we're working on getting someone into place. That person is going to actually be in charge of helping create the program, so that's why there's not a lot of information on it quite yet. We're hoping to have someone in place. We've had 3 interviews. We've put an offer out. We're still waiting on getting that set up. And task force, that was the last thing that was brought up. So there's about 10 of us who serve on the task force. 10 is a good number for a working group. There is a teacher leader, a support staff leader, there is a board member, there's a high school and elementary principals, curriculum director, myself, 2 parents, 1 from each viewpoint, and then Deb, who does a lot of the quarantine dashboard updates and works with all of the quarantine, we call them quarantine secretaries, the O2s mostly, or it's kind of different in each building, but I think the O2 secretaries. So that's who's on the task force. And I put it out to the board, I put it out to principals and the cabinet, and then I reached out to parents who were actively involved in school board meetings or other district meetings that have been active. So that's how people were decided, and that's who's on the committee. I think that's everything.
Okay. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?